I had no idea my life would change like this. It was just an ordinary morning when I stepped out the door to head to work, and my phone buzzed with another notification. It was a message from my sister, Ramona. The short, blunt words hit me like a slap. "You're not invited to my wedding." It was a shock, to say the least. I had always considered myself an important part of this family, and yet my sister left me out. But what stung even more was the reason behind it. Ramona told me that because I didn't have a partner, my presence would make the family photos look unbalanced. She said it would make everything feel off because everyone else would be paired up except me. I couldn't even process what I was hearing at first. I asked if she was seriously uninviting me just because I'm single. She said it wasn't that she was uninviting me, but that I was never invited in the first place. She thought I'd understand because I'm so logical about things, she said. I was left speechless. After everything, I was being excluded for something that wasn't my fault. But the most shocking part wasn't just her words, it was what happened next. Ramona called me back a few days later, not to apologize, but to ask for something. Her photographer had been in a car accident and couldn't shoot the wedding. She was desperate to find a replacement. She asked if I could help, and then came the real request. Could I pay for the new photographer as a wedding gift, since the original one wasn't refunding her deposit? I thought for a moment. I was angry, confused, and hurt, but I had an idea. 2. Backstory. Summarizing the past. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, 34 years old, and it seems like the responsibility of the family has always fallen on me. My family wasn't wealthy, but we had enough to get by. Growing up, my mom worked as a receptionist, and my dad worked in maintenance for an apartment complex. They both worked long hours, so it was always me who had to take care of the younger kids. I started making dinner for everyone when I was 11. I helped my brother Grady with his homework because he struggled with it, and I braided Ramona's hair before school. I changed the twins' diapers and gave them bottles when my parents were too tired. While my siblings had normal childhoods, sleepovers, birthday parties, and sports teams, I stayed home to make sure everything was taken care of. When I turned 16, I got a job at a grocery store. My mom asked me to contribute to the groceries, and I did. I handed over most of my paycheck every 2 weeks. The thing about being the oldest in a family like mine is that nobody asks if you want that responsibility. They just expect it. Ramona, when she was younger, had a habit of taking my things without asking. She'd wear my favorite sweater or use my makeup. When I would stand up for myself, my mom would tell me I was being selfish and that I should share with my sister. This continued into adulthood. When I went off to college, my parents were upset, accusing me of abandoning them. I tried to help from afar by sending money when I could, but I was barely getting by myself. After graduation, I moved to the city for a marketing job and stayed there. My family was disappointed that I didn't come back to Anaheim, but I stood my ground. Over time, I built my career and found stability, but the relationship with my family had shifted. Despite my success, I was still the person they turned to when they needed help financially, but never when they needed emotional support or respect. The tension between my family and me had always simmered beneath the surface, but it started to boil over in subtle ways. Things began to change once I started becoming more independent. While my siblings, especially Ramona, had their partners, careers, and families, I still felt like I was always expected to be the family's backup. I was constantly asked to contribute financially, whether it was for my brother Grady's son's braces or for my parents' mortgage when they were behind. It was like I was their personal bank account, not their daughter. And the more I gave, the more it seemed like they took me for granted. Ramona, in particular, became harder to ignore. I noticed the small things, like when she dismissed my career and my life choices. At family dinners, she would openly compare my achievements to hers, always making me feel like I was falling short. It wasn't just her, either. My parents would join in, as if subtly reminding me that I wasn't living up to their expectations. The turning point came when Ramona got engaged. I was happy for her, of course, but I couldn't help but notice the subtle digs. My mom started talking about wedding plans, asking me when I would get married, almost as if it was something expected of me too. Every time I saw her, she would make comments about my biological clock. It wasn't malicious at first, but over time, the pressure grew. When I found out about the wedding date, I was excited at first, until I realized I hadn't received an invitation. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it got lost in the mail, right? But then, as the days passed, I realized no one in the family had mentioned it. Not a word. I finally texted Ramona and asked about it. Her response was as expected. She hadn't invited me because I was single. That was the real reason. She couldn't have me there, alone, making the family picture unbalanced. The sting of that moment stayed with me, but I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to make a scene, but then, as I started thinking about it, the reality of what was happening set in. The day Ramona called me back to apologize was the same day I realized I could no longer play the role they wanted me to play. She apologized, of course. She said she was just stressed about the wedding and didn't mean what she said. She begged me to come to the wedding. But then, just as I thought things might go back to normal, she asked for my help. She needed a photographer. I wasn't sure how I felt at first. I was angry, of course, but I also wanted to stand my ground. I knew she didn't want me at the wedding, not unless I could do something for her. She'd already shown me where I stood. But then I came up with an idea. I wasn't going to just help her. If she needed a photographer, then she would get one, but on my terms. I called Edwin, my boyfriend, who was a wedding photographer. We'd been together for almost 2 years now, and I knew he could help. I asked him if he was free that Saturday to shoot a wedding in Anaheim. He was furious on my behalf, but he agreed. I called Ramona back the next day. I told her I found a photographer who could replace the one who'd been in the car accident. She was thrilled, but I didn't mention who the photographer was. I didn't tell her I would be bringing Edwin as my date. I figured if she wanted me there, she would have to accept me as I was, and that meant accepting the reality of what she had done. The day of the wedding came, and it was everything I had feared. The tension between Ramona and me was thick in the air, but I held it together. Edwin was busy setting up for the photos, and I tried to find a seat. But then came the moment I will never forget. I found my name card. It wasn't in the front with the rest of my siblings. No, I was seated in the very back row, next to the portable bathrooms, as if I was some kind of afterthought. I walked to my mom, who was busy with the bridal party, and asked about it. She told me that Ramona had decided where I would sit. It's because we have limited space in the front, she said. But the truth was, my siblings were all seated in the front, each with their partners, and I was left behind. I couldn't believe what was happening. The sting of being excluded from my sister's wedding was more than I could bear. I could feel the weight of it in my chest, a sharp, deep ache that wouldn't go away. My heart pounded in my ears as I walked back to where I was supposed to sit. It felt like a punishment for something I hadn't done. I sat there, in the last row, by the toilets, with no one to talk to, no one to share in the moment. My mom was still in the bridal suite, and my siblings were all laughing and talking in the front rows with their partners. I watched as they took their seats, completely oblivious to how hurt I felt. But as the ceremony started, I tried to keep it together. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to be the dramatic one, the one who always ruined things. I stayed quiet, just like I had my whole life. I thought I could let it slide. But when Ramona came out to check on the ceremony setup, I saw her shouting at Edwin, my boyfriend. She was rude and dismissive, barking orders at him like he was some hired help, not the professional photographer I had brought to help her out. I saw the tension in Edwin's face as she ignored him, as she treated him like he was beneath her. That was the breaking point. Edwin was already frustrated, and when I saw how she was treating him, I knew we couldn't stay. I walked up to him and asked what he was doing. He looked at me, his jaw tight, and said, "I'm done. We're leaving." We packed up his equipment, and I left my name card on the chair in the back row as a final signal that I had been there, that I had tried. Then we walked out of the venue, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The guilt didn't hit me until later, but it wasn't the guilt I had expected. It wasn't guilt for leaving. It was guilt for not having done this sooner, for not standing up for myself when it was so obvious that I had been treated like I didn't matter. The next few days were chaos. My phone blew up with messages. I turned it off after seeing a few texts from Ramona and my mom, asking where I was and why I had left. By the time I turned my phone back on, I had dozens of messages waiting for me. Ramona sent me 12 texts in a row, each one angrier than the last, asking where we were. She said the ceremony was over, and they needed to take family photos. She said I had ruined everything. My mom, who had never stood up for me in any meaningful way, sent me a message saying that I had ruined Ramona's wedding day, and that I should have just sucked it up and stayed. Grady, my brother, called me, but I didn't pick up. I couldn't bear hearing what they all thought of me. I had already made my decision. I had already left, and I wasn't going back. The next day, my mom called me again, her voice trembling with anger. She said Ramona was heartbroken. She said Ramona needed me there and that I had made everything worse. She asked me to come back and apologize. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was done with the manipulations, done with being the family scapegoat. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't owe anyone an apology. I had tried to help, I had tried to be there for Ramona, but she had made it clear that I wasn't wanted. 7. Dark moment. Emotional low. The darkest part of this story came when I was alone, thinking about the consequences of my actions. After everything that had happened, I couldn't escape the feeling that maybe I had gone too far. I'd always been the one to hold the family together, to put everyone else's needs before my own. But now I had burned every bridge. I hadn't just left the wedding, I had walked away from my entire family. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I had made the right choice. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, feeling that familiar emptiness creeping in. The feeling of isolation, of being the one no one understood, had been with me for years. But this time it was different. This time it was because I had chosen to be alone, because I had chosen myself over them. I received a message that changed everything. It was from Grady. He had been the only one who reached out to me with any kind of understanding, but even he was starting to see things through the lens of Ramona's story. But this time, he told me something that shocked me. He had spoken to James, Ramona's husband. James had heard the full story from Grady, about the seating arrangement, about how Ramona treated Edwin, about how she had treated me. James said he was furious. He said he didn't blame me anymore. He said that Ramona had manipulated the entire family into thinking I was the villain, but he now saw the truth. For the first time, someone in my family stood up for me, and it made all the difference. The fallout from everything that happened at the wedding was both predictable and unexpected. Once the truth began to unravel, the support from my family started to shift. After Grady spoke to James, everything changed. James confronted Ramona, and their entire dynamic fell apart. It was a long, painful process for both of them, but it was clear that Ramona had lost not only her husband's trust, but also much of her credibility with the family. When I received that call from Grady, I was still in disbelief. My mom, who had always chosen to believe in Ramona's version of events, suddenly turned cold. She started to ask questions, real ones, not the ones that made her feel better about herself. But it wasn't an apology. It was disappointment that I had ruined things, and I could hear the edge of guilt in her voice. What shocked me the most wasn't the silence from the rest of the family. It was the absence of accountability from Ramona. Instead of acknowledging her mistakes, she played the victim. She blamed me for ruining her wedding, and even worse, she manipulated everyone into believing I had done it out of jealousy. Her narrative, even in the face of truth, was so powerful that it nearly convinced everyone, including my parents. But what truly stunned me was how quickly they turned on me. They didn't acknowledge the years I had spent supporting them, nor did they see the extent of the abuse I had tolerated. My decision to walk away became the final straw for them, and they started cutting ties with me. Grady, still caught in the middle, tried to convince me that I should make amends, but I wasn't going to bend anymore. It's been weeks since everything came to light. The distance from my family felt like a breath of fresh air, but at the same time, I was grieving the loss of a part of my life that I had tried to hold on to for so long. I thought about everything that had led up to this point, the years of sacrifice, the constant giving, and the lack of recognition. And then I thought about the freedom I had gained. The truth, no matter how painful it was to reveal, had set me free. I realized that for too long, I had let others define my worth. I had let their needs and their opinions shape my decisions. But now, for the first time, I was putting myself first. I didn't need their validation anymore. Ramona and my parents might never understand why I did what I did. They might continue to paint me as the villain in their story, but that was their choice, not mine. I had learned that sometimes, in order to reclaim your life, you need to walk away from people who only take from you and never give back. I wasn't going to live my life based on what others thought of me. I had spent too long doing that, trying to please people who would never appreciate it. Now, I was building a life that was my own. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. Over time, things began to shift. The absence of my family was heavy at first, but as the days passed, it felt less like loss and more like liberation. I realized that I had spent so many years trying to make everyone happy, trying to be the person they needed, that I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten what it felt like to make decisions for myself, to live for me. I had chosen to be honest, even when it cost me my family, And in the end, that honesty became the foundation for my own self-worth. It wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted whether I had made the right decision. But every time I thought back to how they treated me, to how I had been made to feel like I didn't matter, I knew I had done the right thing. Edwin stood by me through all of it. He had always been supportive, but now, after everything had come to light, his respect for me grew even more. I didn't need anyone else to validate me. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that wedding in a back row, humiliated and invisible. Now, I was stronger, more confident, and I knew my value, the aftermath. I did hear from a few family members eventually. Some reached out to apologize. They were people I hadn't expected to hear from. Cousins, distant relatives who had seen the whole debacle from the outside. They understood. They saw through Ramona's narrative and realized I had done what I had to do. They apologized for not standing up for me sooner. I was grateful for their support, but I knew the true test of this journey was in my ability to stand firm, even without their validation. My parents, however, stayed silent. They never called to apologize, and they never acknowledged their part in how things had played out. They didn't see the years of my sacrifices for them. They didn't understand why I'd walked away from a family that, to them, still seemed so important. It hurt, but it also reinforced my decision to keep my distance. I realized that their love, however much they tried to show it, had always been conditional on my obedience and my silence. Moving forward. It's been months now since the wedding and everything that followed. My life has continued to grow in ways I never anticipated. My career has flourished. My photography business has taken off, and with Edwin's support, I've been able to expand in ways I never thought possible. I've started teaching a photography course at the local community college. It feels like my work has finally come full circle. What once seemed like a hobby has now become my life's work, and it's thriving. Edwin and I have gotten closer. I didn't expect to find someone who understood me so fully, who didn't try to change me or force me to be anyone other than who I am. We've talked about our future together, but it's still early. For now, I'm focused on enjoying the life I've built for myself. The final lesson. And as for my family, I've come to realize that not everyone is meant to be in your life forever. I spent so much of my time trying to make everyone else happy, trying to fit into their expectations, that I forgot the most important thing. I need to be happy for myself. And sometimes that means walking away from the people who refuse to see you for who you really are. I still think about my siblings and my parents sometimes. I think about what could have been, about the family we might have been if things had been different. But I've learned that I can't change them. I can't fix what's broken in them. All I can do is move forward on my own terms and build the life I deserve.